In the budget, the Chancellor highlighted that as far as the UK economy is concerned, the economy still borrows too much, we don't invest enough, we don't export enough, and we don't save enough. And there was a range of measures announced in the budget which are tackling all of those. What the Chancellor highlighted was that this budget is targeted at people. If you're a doer, a maker or a saver, he dubbed this budget as the budget for you. As far as the economic growth forecasts are concerned, there was significant revisions, upward revisions in economic growth relative to this time last year. Indeed, the latest budget represented the largest inter-budget upward revisions in at least 30 years. Economic growth last year is now estimated at 1.8%, which was 3 times the rate of growth which was forecast this time last year. 2014 is likely to see economic growth of 2.7%. Again, this is considerably stronger than what was forecast 12 months ago, and economic growth to be maintained at 2.3% next year. Clearly, from a Northern Ireland perspective, economic growth, continued economic recovery in the UK and strong, robust economic growth is good news for the Northern Ireland economy. George Osborne highlighted that there can be no economic security without control of the public finances. So despite the strong economic recovery, the UK economy still has what is termed a structural deficit. This is a deficit that will not go away even though economic recovery has returned. And in order to address this deficit, this requires a significant fiscal adjustment, and austerity for Britain is going to continue for several years yet. There are public expenditure cuts, further public expenditure cuts baked into this plan well into the next Parliament up until 2018-2019. And there's also, in terms of further tax rises and all of the budgetary measures which have been announced since the emergency budget in 2010, its cumulative effect of those are still going to take place over the coming years. Savers and pensioners were the biggest beneficiaries from last week's budget. There was a range of measures announced. These included changes in terms of pensions. Most significantly, the effective requirement to purchase an annuity has been removed. This means that pensioners can now take more of their pension as a lump sum, and the cost accrued will be at a lower rate of tax. Also, in terms of savers, there was a new ISA or NISA was announced, and this has raised the threshold of tax-free savings and investments in equities up to 15,000. It also abolished the cap where 50% of an ISA's holding could be held in cash, where now the whole 15,000 can be held in either cash, equities, or a combination of the two. There was also, in terms of increased thresholds for those people investing in premium bonds, which is going to be, the threshold for that is going to be raised to 40,000, and from 2015-16 up to 50,000. There was also, importantly, the savings tax, the 10% rate of tax on savings below £2,880. That has been removed, and the threshold has now been raised to £5,000. So clearly, a lot of gains for people who have money to save, and you would expect that this is going to turn the UK economy into a nation of savers. But interestingly, when you look at the Office for Budget Responsibility's forecast, the savings ratio, which is the rate that households, the amount of their disposable income that they're going to be saving, is actually set to fall relative to current levels. A centrepiece of previous budgets has been raising the personal income tax allowance, and last week's budget was no exception. The personal income tax allowance is set to rise from £10,000 next month, and it's going to be raised to £10,500 in 2015-16. So again, this is going to be taking more people in the UK and in Northern Ireland out of income tax altogether. Alongside other thresholds, last week also saw an increase in the higher rate of income tax threshold, for the 40% rate, and this is the first increase, albeit a marginal one, since 2010. It's actually noted that because the higher rate tax threshold hasn't risen, an increasing number of people in the UK and Northern Ireland have been falling into the higher tax bracket. Indeed, Northern Ireland has seen the number of higher tax payers, higher income tax payers, rise by 50% between 2009-10 and 2014-15. This has seen the number of higher income tax payers rise from 8.1% back in 2007-8, and it's now 1 in 10 of income tax payers in Northern Ireland are paying at the 40% rate. Looking at other measures, there was in terms of the childcare costs allowance, where it is going to be raised to £2,000 up to a maximum of £2,000, or 20% of a maximum of £10,000 for each child aged under 12 years of age. There was also other benefits in terms of for families and households in terms of petrol duty rise, which was due to be implemented in September this year, has been scrapped, and that's against the context of falling petrol prices. And indeed, we've seen petrol prices are now currently at their lowest rate in 3 years. There were also a raft of business-friendly measures announced last week. One of the most significant was the increase in the annual investment allowance. This was due to expire this year, but it's been extended for another year, and the actual threshold has been doubled. So there's now £500,000 is now eligible for tax relief on eligible plant and machinery investment. There was also a range of other measures in terms of extending the tax credit, increasing the tax credit on loss-making SMEs. There was also the Seed Investment Enterprise Allowance, which is to help finance startups. It has now been made permanent, and the various capital gains tax relief and reinvestment relief along with that will be extended as well. We've also had then the social investment tax relief of 30% was also announced. And there was also then a package of measures in terms of looking at addressing the energy costs. Last week also unveiled that Northern Ireland is set to have an enterprise zone, a pilot in Coleraine. This will take place in a site adjacent to the Coleraine University campus, and it involves the setting up of a global data centre, the 5 Nines company, a £20 million investment, which is an endorsement of Northern Ireland's telecommunications infrastructure here. Last week's budget also announced a number of measures aimed at trying to stimulate the housing market, in terms of the likes of extending the Help to Buy equity scheme, also in terms of a number of measures to try and increase the supply of housing and help house builders. But probably the most interesting thing from a housing market perspective was actually in terms of the Office for Budget Responsibility's forecast for house price growth. They see that the average house price in the UK is going to rise by almost a third between now and 2018. Well, we certainly don't expect the Northern Ireland housing market to see average house prices rise by a third over the next 4 to 5 years. What is also significant is in terms of looking at the inheritance tax thresholds, which currently are at 325,000. So for a couple, that would be 650,000. Those are frozen until 2017, 2018, and therefore there's going to be an increasing number. When you think of the property price increases, there's going to be an increasing number of households falling into that inheritance tax threshold, and are going to have to pay death duties. And the Office for Budget Responsibility has allowed for this, and it's forecasting significant increases in inheritance tax revenues for the coming years. Last week's budget also had particular focus in terms of the usual alcohol, tobacco and gambling duties. There were some of the headline populist announcements in terms of halving the rate of tax on bingo duty from 20% to 10%, while other gambling duties were increased. In terms of tobacco duties, it's going to rise in terms of 2% above RPI inflation, and for Northern Ireland, that hits Northern Ireland households more than anywhere else, because we have a higher preponderance of smokers relative to the UK as a whole. We also saw the populist 1p cut in beer duty. We also then saw the various wine and spirits and other alcohol escalators were then abolished, but they will still rise in line with RPI inflation. The big picture for the UK economy hasn't really changed much. So while there are aspects of where the economy is recovering, one area of the economy which isn't going to recover is in terms of public spending or public expenditure. It is set to continue to fall going forward into the next Parliament. What we have seen already in terms of public spending, it has fallen by, in real terms, if you look at public spending, stripping out welfare payments and debt interest payments, it has actually fallen by almost 17%, set to fall by almost 17% from 2009-10 up to 2018-2019. If we look at some of the analysis, the post-budget analysis conducted by the Institute of Fiscal Studies last week, they were actually forecasting that departmental spending, public spending, which again excludes the welfare and debt and interest payments, is set to fall from 2014-15 up to 2018-19, so that's 3% in real terms every year, and that compares with 2.3% every year from 2010-11 up to 2014-15. So clearly the public spending cuts are going to be more severe in the next Parliament than they have been in the current one, and this is going to be a big challenge for those regions in the UK which are reliant on public spending, particularly Northern Ireland. We're more exposed to public spending changes than any other part of the UK because of our reliance in the public sector, and this is going to act as a big drag on the economy going forward. Fiscal austerity is going to be with us for some time yet, and alongside fiscal austerity we're going to have interest rate rises beginning from next year. Clearly this combination is something we haven't experienced yet, but it's something that we're going to have to get used to.